welcome to the DME podcast, brought to you by DME, the podcast booking platform. Whether you're a podcaster or an aspiring guest, the DME app is the perfect platform for you to get booked and manage your podcast bookings. I'm your host, Sukhay, the founder of DME, and on this podcast we'll be discussing the latest news and views in tech, the ins and outs of entrepreneurship, and even dipping our toes into the adrenaline-filled world of mixed martial arts. In this week's episode, we return to combine two of the podcast's favourite themes, AI and startups. We're joined by Dr. Joachim Timlon of the University of Birmingham Business School, a leading expert in strategy, startups and artificial intelligence. With a rich background spanning management consultancy, startup leadership and corporate roles at companies like IKEA, Joachim brings a unique insight into the intersection of entrepreneurship, AI and sustainability. Our conversation explores the evolution of unicorn and green startups, the transformative roles of AI in scaling businesses, and the critical balance between technological innovation and sustainable practices. From the rise of generative AI to the future of AI-powered factories and green technology unicorns, Joachim shares his vision for how founders can harness AI responsibly to create lasting value. This is a very thought-provoking conversation with some fascinating insights and is well worth 30 minutes of your time. Joachim Timlon, welcome to the DME podcast.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you giving up your time to do this. So as we were just explaining, I kind of found your profile in the search for interesting guests, and I think you kind of bridged two of the themes of the podcast in terms of business and startups and artificial intelligence and AI and the use of those. So I think you're uniquely placed to have conversations on both these areas. So thank you very much for coming along.
Oh, thank you.
Do you mind just giving the audience a quick introduction to yourself and your background and what led you to this specific field of study?
Sure. I am at the University of Birmingham, or more specifically at the business school. I've been there now for 7 years, and my background is actually in the industry. So I come from a startup setting. I initially, after my undergraduates, I had different kinds of management consultancy positions in London. And then I had the opportunity actually to be part of a startup company for almost 10 years. So we grew from 0 to almost 10 million pounds in 8 years. At that time was quite an extraordinary accomplishment. And we were awarded 3 times for being in Sweden, where I come from, a gazelle company. And then for some reasons, life turned out differently, and I got the opportunity to work for IKEA, which is a completely different breed. So I was interim manager in Italy, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from obviously that commercial and corporate experience, what then led you into academia and specifically around focusing on startups? I think you've got a lot of research work into unicorn startups. Would you like to explain to the audience the concept of unicorns?
Yeah, sure. Well, what led me into the academy was actually that in my first jobs that I had, I felt that although we gathered a lot of information and knowledge, that we sort of never came to the full picture of things. And one actually person who made a big difference in my life was when I met Peter Senge, who talked about learning organizations. And that made me realize that I wanted to do something else. So actually I started to do my PhD in parallel with working as a management consultant. And hence it took more years than 4 to complete everything, because I also got married and have 3 kids.
Life always takes over.
Yes, it does. But eventually I came to the business school in Birmingham. And also here, I was given the opportunity essentially to teach my passion, which is strategy. And while teaching strategy, I came across, of course, startup companies. And I think that could have to do with my background in the industry and background in the startup company. And I started to scratch on the surface. And unicorns, let's say it was 4 or 5 years ago, was a rather new concept at the time. And since then, I've been working more and more with unicorns, and also found that there's a huge difference between startup companies and unicorn companies. And then there's this divide between decacorns, hectacorns, and we even have something called soonicorns, soon to be a unicorn. And then, of course, the small microcorns that are almost like the startup companies.
Okay. So that's a very, it's quite a reductive level of reasoning in terms of describing startups. So how have you found the startup scene in the UK in your experience here?
I was so fascinated and happy to be in the right place. I hadn't imagined that at all when I came to the UK. I didn't know that it was actually what is called unicorn kingdom. One of the prime ministers coined this term many, many years ago and said that the UK actually had the conditions for favorable conditions for startup companies to become unicorn. And then I read some research actually indicating that there are more unicorn companies in the UK than anywhere else compared to European countries, except for US and China, of course. But if you have a European focus, you will see that there are more unicorns actually than in France and Germany, and also compared to Sweden, where I come from.
What do you think of some of the rationale or the reasons behind that then?
That's a good question. I think it has a lot to do with London. I think it has a lot to do with having venture capital, which is driving this. Because if you now look at unicorns, the difference again is that if we talk about startup companies, you could have a startup companies that has, to some extent, a limited ambition to grow. You could say, well, I would like to grow, of course, to some extent, or 5, 10, or 20% a year. And then you have unicorns. And unicorns, they actually, in order to fit the definition of $1 billion and still being privately held, then you grow from 0 to 1 billion in 4 years. And in order to do that, you need extensive venture capital.
Okay. So it can't just be capital though, right? Because obviously thinking Frankfurt is obviously a financial center in Europe, similar to how London is, but there must be other combinations or other factors. Maybe it's the people, maybe it's the processes in terms of the governance structures around London that kind of facilitates startup growth or business growth.
Sure. I think that the capital is, of course, very important, but even more important is ideas. To have ideas that you put into business models, and you have the ambition to scale, to grow at scale, which is, of course, a bit different from scaling up a company. Here, when you are growing at scale, you are using not incremental growth, but you are sort of growing in exponential terms. So you're going from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and so on. You grow exponentially. And when you grow exponentially, you need, of course, to have an idea that is very competitive. And here is the opportunity to use AI or other kinds of digital technologies in order to have an edge. And this is how I came into deeper understanding of startup companies and unicorns. And that was when I sort of dove into green unicorns, as we call them, unicorns or companies that are using green technology in order to make the world a better place, and at the same time grow at scale.
Okay, we'll come on to the sustainability aspects of your work, but obviously you mentioned AI there, and my triggers, my senses are triggered by the sense about, because obviously AI has obviously exploded in the zeitgeist for the last 2-3 years. I think it's relatively new from being out there and being utilised. But how have you found the the impact of AI on the startup scene in your experience over the last couple of years? It's probably, I'm assuming it's transformed the way startups talk about technology.
Yes, it has indeed. I had the opportunity actually to come across AI before it was a hype. So this was maybe 5, 6, or 7 years ago. At that time, AI was sort of not hyped as it is today, but was something that was spoken of as a future thing to come. And I actually introduced it on the syllabus. Because at that time I was a program director for one of the engineering programs at the university. And I remember that when I brought it up, there were some colleagues and people around me who said that, well, are you quite sure about this, Joachim? Is AI actually, is there a need for the students to learn about AI? And then all of a sudden, just a few years ago, came the explosion of AI, thanks to ChatGPT, which is a different kind of AI. So all of a sudden, we have different kinds of AI.
Yeah, I think obviously ChatGPT, the lay people like myself, was probably the first experience of an artificial intelligence model or a large language learning model. Get my words out. And obviously that transformed. I think talking a little bit earlier off mic around my own startup journey, and I think I kind of went through all the pain of trying to develop a product and do all the documentation around it. And then about a month after I launched, I discovered ChatGPT. I thought, why the hell did I spend all this time doing this?
Yeah.
So has the impact of AI really accelerated the rate at which startups are founded and at which they can grow as well, in your experience?
Definitely, I think so. But again, I think it's essential that you differentiate and distinguish the different kinds of AIs, because initially when AI came, which by the way is not a new concept. I mean, it was developed in the 1950s, I think, by Alan Turing. It is initially a very traditional way of engineering, of working with algorithms. And you need to be quite skilled as a programmer in order to use AI. And then, as I said a few years ago, it was democratized by generative AI using these language models. So all of a sudden you have a language model that understands text, and that makes the huge difference. Yeah. And now the sort of the most advanced AI is cognitive agents, and that's a completely different breed.
So they're the actual practical uses for your general consumer in using AI to kind of do task management for you, isn't it? The use of agents.
Yeah, well, I think that everybody is sort of using AI in some way, even if you don't use ChatGPT. Just you go into Microsoft and then you type in something like you would like to know, and out comes a huge explanation of what it is you would like to know. And that's essentially driven by algorithms that are employed or applied by Microsoft, for instance, if you go into Microsoft as a tool.
Yeah. So what are some of the best examples of AI that you've seen in some of the startups that you work with, or some of the startups that you've researched, and whether they be unicorns or just yet, or emerging startups, or was it microcorns?
Yeah. Well, I just recently started to research about consumer biotechnology. I think this is a fascinating area where AI, generative AI, but also AI agents actually can be used. So I'm addressing that topic from an entrepreneurial point of view, because it is estimated that it can be a lot of revenues generated, billions and billions of US dollars, actually. And I'm looking into a couple of companies. Here, there's sort of a bit challenging to find companies that are actually using consumer biotechnology. There are 3 clusters. One of the clusters is, of course, in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And one of the companies that I find very, very fascinating is a company called Tempus. They have a San Francisco office. And the founder and the CEO has actually created what we can call an algorithmic system. And this is perhaps the most advanced way of using AI. It's a kind of operative system where you're using machine learning. So now we're going one step deeper. We are sort of leaving AI, which, by the way, is not doing anything. AI is just an explanation of how you mimic human behavior. Mm-hmm. So if you want to understand the operations or the actions taken by the machine, you need to go one step further into the machine learning processes.
Okay, that's quite fascinating then. So that's how AI has benefited founders or startups. From your research, where do you think startups should not rely on AI? Because there is obviously a lot of hype, and obviously it's the way it's been advertised. All startups seems to have a prerequisite to include we're an AI company in their pitch deck or in their business models. Are there cases where you think are certain businesses that should refrain from embarking on an AI journey, or just yet, or?
No, I don't think they should refrain from it. I think that they definitely need to embrace it. But the question is how to embrace it, the scope of the embracement, so to say. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the key decisions that startup companies need to make is how to use it. To what extent it should be integrated at all in the business processes and in the business model. Because bear in mind that, again, if you are a small company, as you said, then if you want to grow, you also need to make up your mind how you want to grow, if you want to grow at scale, or if you are just happy with scaling up. And if you're just using AI too, let's say they're using a generative AI, it could be a support for your activities, whether if you're using agentic AI, then all of a sudden you are integrating the tools into the processes, and then you work much more with automation, and that's something completely different.
Yeah. So my own thoughts on this was obviously my career has been in kind of corporate world and large established IT companies, or companies in general with established IT departments. I think it's a lot more difficult to get those oil tankers of companies with embedded processes that have been evolved over many, many years, and to kind of mitigate against various other errors or risks that the business see. And trying to get them to adopt AI and trust the machine is a long, drawn-out process. Whereas a startup, they're looking to obviously be economical, grow fast, and they will, rather than go through the process of trying to hire teams to implement certain processes, whether it's product development, customer acquisition, customer retention, whatever it may be, or even funding, they will probably be more likely to employ AI. And there's so many AI models and systems and providers out there. If you don't like one, there'll be another one, and the rate of progress and development is so fast these days. Every other week you hear about the latest, greatest AI model that beats all the others. And it's hard to keep pace and making that the right choice for you. But it's probably easier for a startup to be agile and be flexible enough to adopt different models and maybe use a little bit of each one until you find the right one, than it is for the larger corporations. So I think there'll be a slower adoption from the large corporate entities for AI. I think one of the best examples I heard was Klarna quickly last year jumped out and they replaced their the customer contact center staff with AI models, and quickly rolled back on that decision when they found out it didn't quite live up to the expectations of their customers.
Sure.
So yeah, there's lots of scope in this area, especially on AI, and it's very unique in terms of how startups adopt that. But the other thing you mentioned was, how about you focus on green and sustainable startups as well?
Yeah.
How can startups in kind of more sustainable objectives and kind of trying to do good for the world, not necessarily have a profit motive, how can they leverage AI to kind of achieve their objectives?
Well, I think that AI can help a lot in accomplishing the SDGs. Actually, SDG used to be actually a focus of mine before, because I think that climate change is perhaps the most important question right now. But equally, coming up with how we want AI to be in service of human mankind. I think that's also an extremely important question. I think that when it comes to speed and sustainability, AI can, of course, optimize resource allocation. I think that is one of the key areas where you can use AI. Of course, improving efficiency and productivity, that is a core tenet. I think it can be used also to enable good and informed decision-making in various different sectors. So these are the three areas where I think you can actually use AI in order to advance towards the SDGs.
And is there a balance to be struck here, though? Because obviously, I think some of the conversations I hear around AI is the core commodity use of energy generation and energy power. So how do startups
This is a really, really interesting question, because I think one of the questions, or one of the things with AI that has not received enough attention is data capacity. Because there's so much talk about the potential of what AI can do, and AI can do a lot of things really. But at the same time, in order to do that, in order for companies to adopt AI to the extent that, for instance, European Community or the British government wanted, then there's need for data capacity. And that data capacity is not there right now. And data capacity is reliant on electricity. And there's a huge concern about how that electricity is generated. So, for instance, what we can see right now is that the big companies that do research and development in AI, they actually are starting up nuclear plants in order to have enough of capacity in order to charge the data centers.
Is that going to be I think for future predictions here, do you think that's going to be, there's obviously a race on for the large companies, the large AI providers models to kind of get control of energy supply lines and the data center real estate and keeping them fed and watered? Is that going to be a real concern for startups who are looking to be more sustainable? Are they not actually, we're using, I don't know, OpenAI's model, or we're using Grok's model, for example, but they're consuming the power generation of a small city every day? Does that really fit with our ethoses of what they're trying to do? Will they potentially favor the more sustainability goals? Do you actually go, no, we'll do it a different way? Maybe we'll favor smaller AI models that may not be as productive or maybe as efficient, but there is a balance to be struck there, I suppose.
Oh yes, and I think this is one of the key decisions here. When you, as a startup, when you decide the extent to which you want to use AI, either you say I'm happy to use ChatGPT as an advisor or something that helps me as a complement to my services. Or you go one step deeper, say, no, I would like to integrate either traditional AI or agentic AI in my services. But if you're going to do that, then you need to be sort of a hyperscaler, and a hyperscaler needs much more capacity from the data centers. And you need to be aware of that. And the more capacity you need from these data centers, of course, the larger is the footprint that you're making. And this we're touching upon a new research project here, actually, because China is really, really advanced in many areas. So we are sort of looking into how AI could actually be used in space. where you could put the data centers in space as a solution to not having them here on Earth, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm just trying to get my head around that. So, okay, we've got a power source in the sun, right? So we've got lots of solar panels. I'm getting on a bit in here, so I still remember old rack servers, which I'm guessing is a background of most of these data centers and these AI models anyway. So I'm just wondering how we get those floating rack servers with Ethernet cables plugged into them.
Yeah, this is interesting that you mentioned that, because you remember maybe if you've seen Matrix, how the machines took over the world. And they took over the world where the humans decided to cover the solar panels. That was the reason. That was how the rebellion started by one of the agents. I think it was, can't really remember which number of the agent, but it was an agent that started the rebellion that eventually led to that the machine took over. Yeah.
Well, this was obviously hearing conversations about AI for many years, and you get the doomsayers and oh no, it's going to be Skynet, and machines are going to take over and blow up the world. My very simplistic, probably ignorant thought process was, well, if the machine doesn't know anything about power, if you just simply cut the power source off, you destroy the AI. But so maybe that's the same similar concept. I'm guessing the machine learning models now have kind of evolved beyond that now. Sure, they're more than capable of understanding their own power sources, but whether they are capable of feeding themselves their own power, I'm not quite sure just yet. So maybe the end of the world isn't quite nigh.
Well, I think that AI is blowing up the world right now, as we are speaking, actually, because AI. There is malicious use of AI. We can see, for instance, how countries are using drones, how they're using and also equipping drones with ammunition and going over to other countries and committing different kinds of deeds. So we see it right now. Depending on who you're listening to, but for instance, if you listen to Max Tegmark, who is the father here and leading the dialogue on the human-centric AI, he says that it's too late, and it's too late when the genius and what is sort of making that is when you go into unguided machine learning, that is the tipping point.
Yeah, I think we've previous guests on the podcast, had some of your colleagues at Birmingham University actually, are talking about the regulation of AI and what those global initiatives need to look like to kind of regulate the potential dangers or mitigate against the potential dangers of that. But you obviously mentioned the use of AI in drones and the kind of recent wars that we've seen. I'm a big fan of history, and one of the kind of early things I learned or kind of became apparent to me was how wars kind of lead to an accelerated innovation in technology. The example that always stands out to me is that the First World War in 1914 started off with men on horses in cavalry and ended with men dropping bombs out of airplanes. That's 4 years. So I think the current conflicts around the world, and especially in Russia, Ukraine, and obviously in the Middle East as well, have seen an acceleration of AI tech and drone technology, certainly. And everyone's got actually these drones cost a few £100 to produce and be able to drop bombs and unfortunately kill people, whereas the Tomahawk missile costs £20 million a time, or maybe probably £100 million a time. But then again, you see the kind of simpler mitigation solutions as well. I think I saw footage in the Ukraine war of them throwing a net up and catching a drone, and it comes down and is completely harmless to anybody. So it's funny how things evolve. But I think we're probably on the start of this journey. We don't exactly know where it's going to end, but we'll have to be careful in how we watch it go along. But just reverting back to starters and founders, and rather than trying to get too depressed about the future state of the world and technology, what advice kind of would you give to founders who are looking to integrate AI now in the current climate that we're at? Obviously, we can't predict too far into the future because obviously things are always changing. If there's one piece of advice you could give to a founder today about how to incorporate AI into their business, what would that be?
Well, I think first of all, embrace it. see it as something that is essential and useful, which is quite interesting because we can already now see counter movements, sort of anti-AI movements, saying that this is bad, this is not good, we don't want this. But if you do believe in development, I think that this is just necessary to embrace. Technology development has always been there, and now we see one too. So we are sort of going through a revolution that's taking place in front of our eyes. And as an entrepreneur, there are so many opportunities where you can use AI today. I think that there will be a divide between smaller startup companies that are using AI in a way where it's sort of as a support to the services, and then we will see the big AI developers and software developers almost monopolizing value chains. And this is a bit of a concern, this divide here, because the big companies, they have much more money. So we've been doing also another research project here in China, actually, where we are sort of investigating the AI factories. And an AI factory is a factory with 10,000 robots. So you have more robots than people. And of course, you could then create a factory that is extremely efficient. And then if you are in the automotive sector like this one here, you can actually appropriate almost 100% of the value in the automotive business network. And as a consequence, you build a monopoly. So if you are a small startup company, as always, you need to think carefully about what makes you unique. And if you can't beat the elephants, if you can't beat somebody who is much bigger than you on scale, then you will have to think how you differentiate.
So that's good advice. So finally, just to wrap up, we're conscious of time. What's the one that we've talked about, the kind of the dangers and the potential threats, but what's the one thing about AI and entrepreneurship that really excites you the most, and one thing that we should be watching?
Well, my perspective on entrepreneurship and AI is right now because I'm inside the academy, so I'm also teaching. And now all of a sudden I see that there are increasingly modules, not only modules and courses about how to use artificial intelligence in order to create value, but actually modules and courses that are going so deep into the topic that they're offering how to actually program, how to work with machine learning. So they're going deep into actually the development of machine learning, because entrepreneurship will develop into a human face automation. So what will then sort of be the activities that entrepreneurs can do if you not only automate all the processes, but you also delegate the decision to the machine? What is left? So this is how the new entrepreneurship will look like, how you collaborate in the interfaces with the machines.
Very interesting. Okay, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. So, Dr. Timlon, if everyone wants to follow your work or learn more about your research, what's the best place to find you?
The best place to find me is either on LinkedIn or on the Strategy and International Business homepage, where I have a profile.
Okay, awesome. I think you've got your own website, I saw as well. So I think we'll link to each of your profiles in the show notes, so our audience can find you quickly and easily.
Yeah, please do, and contact me. I'm just happy to engage and share and learn more about this topic.
That's amazing. I'd love to do a follow-up on this conversation in a few months' time, because I think, like we said earlier, it's an ever-changing world and moving very fast. So there's always things to talk about. But Dr. Joachim Timlon, thank you very much.
I think there's hope. If you've seen June, there's hope.
Always hope. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Timlon.
Pleasure to have you.